Hey Blazers, this episode is brought to you by Audible.com, an Amazon company. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Blaze Entertainment.
Or visit the sponsor and supporters links on our website at intotheblaze.com. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Now let's start the show.
What's going on, Blazers? We are back with another episode of Blaze Entertainment Spotlight Edition. I'm your host, Kwame, joined by the beautiful, melanin proficient, the queen of Blaze, Miss Free. What's going on, girl?
You know, not much.
Same shit, different day.
Yep, exactly.
Oh my God. Anyway, so we are very excited to have an amazing human being on the show. We've been wanting to get this person on the show for a long time. Shout out to Marisol, our admin assistant, for hooking us up and doing the work, girl. She did the work, getting her onto our show. And so I would like to formally introduce the number one fan of The Read podcast, and our hero podcast, and also the owner and founder of podcastincolor.com. You can, if you guys don't know, she is the, if you guys have ever used hashtag pods with an S in color, then you know Berry. Berry, how are you, madam?
Hello. I am great. And, of course, you know, we were talking about Twitter. My @ is the same, podcast with an S in color, if you want to tweet me anything about the episode.
Yes.
At her, so she knows it's real.
Okay. So Berry, for those who don't know, we did mention that The Read, and you have self-proclaimed, and we agree that you are the number one fan of The Read. And you also work for the Loudspeakers Network, which is where The Read and also like the Friend Zone and also Getting Grown is on as well, correct?
That is correct, and it all started from a tweet, so you know the power of Twitter. If you use it correctly, it can be really powerful.
Yes, ma'am. And for those, if you guys don't know what podcastincolor.com is, it is the number one website to go to for all types of Black podcasts. Any type of podcast that, you know, in color, literally the name. And one of the reasons why we are so fortunate to have this woman on our show, this beautiful Black queen on our show, is because we have been wanting to get her on the show forever. So, you know, schedules aligned and the universe, you know, worked its magic and did its thing. And this Black queen is on here doing the beautifulness. And we very
shout
much
out to Marisol for following up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Shout out to Marisol, because Marisol's been kicking ass this past couple of weeks. She's been doing the damn thing. So yes, we need to shout out to our beautiful women on Pirate Media Network. So thank you. She's a little timid, so we'll get to her. But anyway, so Berry, tell us a little bit more about, like, you know, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit more about why you started Podcast in Color and, you know, what it is and all that jazz.
Well, I started it so that people could find and feel about podcasts how I feel about The Read. I feel like I love them and I connected with them, and they provide a voice for things and words for things that I don't even think about. And I'm like, this isn't going to be how everyone connects to The Read, but what if everyone could find a podcast and connect that way? Because you never know what someone else is searching for. So Podcast in Color is the largest directory of podcasts so that people can find what they're looking for, find their people.
Yes.
and what, besides The Read, you know, like, what else made you want to start Podcast in Color? Are you interested in creating a podcast of your own, or like what else made you interested in doing that? And how did you find so many podcasts?
Google. Search. That's how I was like really searching different terms and things like that. Clicking on pages, going through pages to see if there was actually anything really there. I was against starting a podcast for the first 2 years. At this point, I can say I'll have a podcast. I don't see myself having a podcast forever or that it'll be a long thing, but I do see a short-term podcast in the future. And I got into it. It's more because of the marketing side. It's just that I saw, looking at the read, more things they maybe could be doing and to be noticed, or things they were doing, like they could do it in a different way and maybe more people will react. And so it was more, they got me more interested into how they could grow bigger and how other podcasts should be growing bigger.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
You have met Crystal and Kid Fury, correct?
Yes, I have met them. They've touched me voluntarily, so I am a blessed person. But I would say that their second year anniversary, I want to say that's when I went to New York for their live show, and that's the first time I ever met them in person. And then it was after that I kind of talked to Chris Morrow about maybe working with them and things like that.
And what made you, and how does it, like, what do you specifically do for the Loudspeakers Network?
I do the social media. So just like how I'm on Twitter ranting and raving all the time, I just control the social media and help out with the talking to the social media for the different podcasts and things like that. So just trying to think of ideas and different background things to help the network.
Yes. Doing the damn thing. And I have to actually, this is like kind of like a full circle moment for Miss Free and I, because for me personally, like I didn't know about podcasts until Miss Free introduced me to the read. So,
I sure did.
She sure did. And I didn't know like how to take it, because I was just like, you know, is this a radio show? She was like, no, it is a podcast. It is the podcast. And so she was like, you need to listen to it. And so, like, to be quite honest with you, like, I was just in this whole like hippie world in my own, and I didn't really understand. And I'm light skinned, and I understand how they feel about light skinned people, but I get it. You know? But you know, I was in my own light skinned world, and then Miss Free, being the melanin proficient woman that she is, she was like, look, you need to get into the read, get into it. And so I remember we were at work. This is when we were working together. And I was listening to it, and I could not stop laughing. The very first episode that I listened to was Smell and Taste. And so
oh my God.
Yeah, girl. So you can imagine like an entire quiet room and people like on their computers, and me and Miss Free had our headphones in, and we're just literally cracking up, and nobody's understanding why. And Miss Free has developed, at the time, she had developed this gift of just like holding it and suppressing her laughter. I didn't. And so I wasn't that proficient yet. And so
I would be prepared for what was coming.
Girl, I was not prepared.
Exactly.
I was not ready. But ever since then, you know, we started, you know, that's what got me and Miss Free closer, is our love for the read, and just, you know, talking more about, you know, Blackness, and just, you know, just understanding how to being woke in myself, and learning more about, you know, my culture, and understanding what's going on in the world, and stop like, you know, being in this like light skin, all about, you know, whatever's going on, whatever's happening, and really getting, you know, to understand what's happening to our culture. And I just really like, I resonated, you know, with Miss Free when I started, you know, listening to him. We started talking about like starting our own show, and I was like, I don't want to start our own show, like, you know, let's do it. She was like, well, why not? And so it is because of Miss Free why all of this has happened. Barely. So and then I remember after like researching more about, you know, because I didn't want to just I felt like, you know, there were so many podcasts out there that are actually doing really well and doing what they're supposed to do in terms of, you know, because I'm on Twitter all the time, and I see you go off on podcasts and how what they should and should not do, Barry, and I literally laugh, and I have you favorited on my Twitter, where I get your notifications immediately. Because,
oh my God.
You know, because it's hilarious. Because sometimes you be going in and it's like, I just don't understand why people can't have good descriptions. Why can't you just have good descriptions? And so like, and it's because of you. Like, I started like looking at like, you know, our show and saying, well, what can we do to improve? And, you know, oh, you know, she has a good point. We should probably do this, or we should probably, you know, work on this a little bit more. We should market it this way, you know. And so thank you for that, because like, it's important, and I think that we should have people out there to kind of help guide, you know, especially Black podcasts, help guide a way to kind of get through the sea of millions and billions of podcasts that are out there and people who are really serious about doing it. So I think that you taking it seriously and you understanding the marketing aspect behind it is and the business aspect behind it. Because I think a lot of people just go in and think it's just a blog, and it's not. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you can vent and say what you want to say and express and give reads and stuff like that, but there is a business aspect to it, and I love the fact that you have pushed that a lot. Like, I remember you had tweeted something out a couple of weeks ago about I think it was a Call Your Girlfriend podcast, or oh my god,
probably.
It was something, and you were talking about, and they were discussing, like, I listened to that episode and they were discussing how
the business of podcasting.
Yes. And so they were discussing how, like, how they came up and what they did in their trials and tribulations. And I was just like, she didn't have to do this. Like, she's putting all this work in and she didn't get paid for it. So God bless you. So what keeps you motivated in doing that? Like, knowing that, you're putting all this effort into it. And sometimes you get, like, I've seen the shade on certain people, and sometimes you don't get, the response that you deserve, damn it. You put work into Podcast in Color. So my whole thing is, like, how do you keep motivated and how you keep focused on doing this?
I would say one thing is I'm very self-motivated, which can kind of mean I don't do things sometimes, but everything I'm doing is something I want to do. Like, it wasn't because somebody pulled me in and I hate my job and I just do it because I have to do it. Like, when I feel something or I'm talking about Twitter about something, I really feel that way. And I'm like, I want people to really be better. I want people to really win. I want people to really care. And it just feels like if we are going to put any effort in, let the effort be worth something. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're not going to do anything, don't do anything. But don't put the least amount of effort and then ask me for more. Like, that's not okay. And then I didn't want to get too sarcastic. I remember you brought up the Kid Fury light skin thing. The one thing most people, I was like, it's more hilarious to me than anything else, because I mean, the huge joke is that Kid Fury loves light-skinned men.
Right.
Anything we know. We know of anything. If somebody light-skinned is walking down the street, he is paying attention. That's why they know so much, because he is there.
And it's funny because I remember, I think it was on their last live show. It wasn't the LA one. I think it was the one after that. And Crystal was like, yeah, let some brother walk down the street looking like barely burnt toast. Like, he gonna turn his head. And I was just like, she right.
So, question for you, Berry. I know, like, you have Podcast in Color. Have you ever considered adding other communities of color within that network?
Like to do a breakdown, like an Asian breakdown or things like that, like inside?
Like Latino, like other communities of color into your directory.
I have them listed. I don't have it broken down, but I feel like right now that's kind of complicated for me since it's one person. Like, I'm doing smaller lists like that. Like, I've done an international list, and I want to do other, like, city lists, but it's just a matter of having the time and giving the time to do it.
Okay, for sure. So you're already doing it.
Yeah. At some point it'll come for sure, but I'm slow, so.
Awesome. All right.
And just to piggyback off of that, just because you do like what we're joking about in terms of, like, you going off sometimes and being passionate about what you're saying. What are some of the, I guess, what are your top 3 things that you've seen with podcasts that they do wrong, and what are some of the 3 things that you recommend that podcasts should do, especially when they start up?
A starting podcast, I would say the top 3 things they do wrong is expecting comments and fans right away, expecting that people are, I guess, more going to listen and take to it right away because they feel like they're discussing something else, and then not giving enough information of what's in the content that they're putting out. So I would say, like, some people right away, they'll be on their first or second episode and they're like, I need questions. And it's like, people need to come to you for that.
Right.
You haven't established why people are coming to you for that. And so it's like, why don't you do like 5 episodes where you're not even mentioning anything like that? And then once you establish yourself in some type of way, people will send in questions that go to your content. And there you go. So
I love that, and I think one of the things that we did in our first month or so, because we actually generated a lot of numbers quickly, and we were a little surprised by that. It's like we were like, okay, wait a minute, and so in the very first month or two, we didn't really discuss listener letters. We talked about it, and we said, hey, if you guys have something that you want to discuss, or if you want to talk, or if you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or even movie reviews that you want us to review and talk about, send them in. And so we weren't like talking about like anything, we had like another segment in place of it, and we had like maybe one or two from our friends that we got in the very first month or whatever. But when we didn't, we had a different segment. Like we had like, I don't know, what was it that we had? I think it was like, cutie of the month or a cutie of the week or whatever, or something like that. Or
I don't remember. It was so long ago.
It was so sick. Girl, it was literally last year.
It's so long ago in my life. Like, I got 100,000 things going. That was literally, like, in my head 10 years ago.
Yeah, in internet time, that was like 10 years ago. Like a year is 10 years.
So one of the things that I've noticed when it comes to podcasts, especially like when they start out, like the expectation, like you were saying, of trying to just automatically, like, we have just launched our podcast today and we're expecting 40 million people tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that they have this huge expectation of especially like people who already have followings. They don't understand that, like, or people who are looking at people who already have followings, they don't understand that they're bringing their followers to their podcast, so they already had a base. So when you're coming out of nowhere into this huge, vast, ocean of podcasts, people have to sift through that, and then you have to do something that's going to be unique enough for them to want to see you. You know what I'm saying? And I think that for me, what has, because I've slowly went from listening to the radio to completely not listening to the radio at all, and all I listen to is podcasts. And it's because it's easier to, there's not as much commercial breaks, and it's also it's focused on particular topics that I care about, and I think that is something that people don't really get. So my question to you is what do you, if you were to start a podcast tomorrow, what would be your first 5 steps?
Well, see, I'm thinking about consulting because I feel like this answer is different for everybody. Mm-hmm. So if this answer, say if I was starting as Danielle, which is my real name for other people, and I started with my Twitter account that only had 500 followers, and those 500 followers sometimes interact with me. If I was starting a podcast tomorrow, my 5 steps would be making sure I have the name saved on SoundCloud, even if I wasn't using that as a URL, making sure that I could do something, like there was URLs with the podcast name, so when people Googled it, it would come up. It's not going to be something they're searching for forever. I would have a podcast graphic that included where my podcast was located, and with links if I could, like the bit.ly links, / the platform. I would probably ask my friends and family, like my cousins, because I would say I probably have about 10 cousins I interact with on a regular basis. Would they either change their Avi on any of their social media or post it on their social media, something like that. And let's see. I don't know, that's probably where I start. And I make sure that I posted it for at least once or twice a day for 7 days. I wouldn't just post it that one day and never come back to it.
Okay.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because I was starting to, because I had a conversation with Marisol a couple of days ago, and I was like, do you think that we're posting too much? And she was like, no, you need to post. And so because I thought that we were posting too much when it came to like our episodes, past episodes, and certain things or whatever. But I've noticed that that's actually gained traction, and so it's actually helped, especially in the past couple of months when, we've had, different guests on the show, and our numbers have grown, a little bit more or whatever. And so I wanted that to increase. And we're fortunate enough, because I know a lot of people don't have, admins or, a staff or whatever. And so we're very, very, very blessed to have a team, to kind of help out with stuff like that. And so while we're working, we have people that are doing, that all day. And so I don't know, for those who don't have that, what would you say to them in terms of discouragement? Because I know that, I had a friend who wanted to start a podcast, and he actually started for 2 months, and he wasn't getting the numbers that, we were getting. But I was like, we've been open for 6 months, girl. You know what I'm saying? We've been,
that's
we've
the
been
thing,
doing
the
it.
comparison thing.
Right.
You really can't compare. And it's even if I started a podcast tomorrow and maybe for the first 5 months I only had 100 listens, it's that. I would take that as, am I speaking to the content that I'm really passionate about? If I got mad or, something happened, is this the thing I talk about, or is this the thing I would be really telling people this is what I'm talking about right here?
Right.
Because when you're doing something like that, it attracts people. Mm-hmm. When you're doing something that you think other people would kind of go to, and you're they're not coming to it because they know that you're just doing it because you want them to come to it.
Right.
And so it really doesn't matter. It's even right now, if the read change subjects, if all of a sudden tomorrow they went to an interview format and they just have people coming in where they talk to each other for a little while, then have somebody come in and they interviewed, people would still listen. I doubt that their numbers will really go down that much because people just want to hear them talk, and they talk about the stuff they like, and they tell you what they don't like. They're honest about that, and that's what people like. It's that honesty. I don't mess with them. I'll mess with them. I mess with them. I mess with them. People want to know you really feel a certain way.
Right. And I'm glad you actually said that, because I know for there are certain times when we'll see something in that's trending or whatever, and we won't talk about it on our show because we just don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? So we only talk about especially when it comes to pop culture, there's so much, there's a vast amount of pop culture crap that's out there, and so there's not a lot of things that we're particularly interested in, and even though it may be interesting to somebody else, we just don't care about it, because I'm not going to be inauthentic and just say something that oh well, that Febreze was cool, thanks. You know what I'm saying? Nobody cares. Girl, I was looking at it and I just thought of something. I had to. You know what I'm saying? And so, but if we see something else that we're talking about, for instance, this past week, with the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Now, Miss Free doesn't like the Real Housewives of Atlanta, but this particular episode, she was on it, and so we talked about it. You know what I'm saying? And so, that's something that that I've noticed with other shows. Especially shows that are in I guess the community, the podcast community, they tend to talk about stuff that they think other people want to hear, and they don't care about it, and it's not the premise of their show. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I feel that way about a lot of shows. And before we got away from it, sorry, one more thing. I just wanted to say, because we talked about starting a podcast, the 5 things. I did a kind of smaller podcast, but say you were going to do a big person, say D-Ray just started a podcast. Something I would do on his level, I would have a hashtag. You guys know I love hashtags. I would have a hashtag, and the first time or any time I tweeted about my podcast, I would use that hashtag. I would probably schedule 2 to 3 tweets for the first week or two that I had the podcast to use my hashtag when talking about my podcast and posting links. And I would really push podcast conversations. I would make sure that people are drawing podcast people to me. So I would just maybe start a podcast conversation where I say, I wouldn't even ask what podcast you like. I would say, what do you like about podcasts? And then after that, I would say, I would ask things to get into deep podcasts. What's your favorite moment you heard about a podcast? Or can you give me a time code? I would try to go into a deeper podcast level because he's a bigger person, so you're going to get people anyway. But it's if you can get people talking about podcasts, then those little people that don't get what podcast is, because that's a huge issue, will kind of come into it more oh, okay, that's what's in podcast. Oh, what's in his podcast? Oh, let me look at the hashtag. Let me click a link. Let me listen.
Wise words, madam. Wise words.
Formulated.
and so, Ms. Free, do you have any questions? I don't want to overtake it.
I just had a brief question that just kind of sprung up in my mind. I know that there are a lot of I don't want to say like non-celebrity people who are trying to create their own podcasts. And I know that since podcasting is becoming such a big thing now, you would find, senators like Bernie Sanders has his own podcast. Oftentimes a lot of people who are public figureheads are getting into the podcast realm. Do you think, or do you feel that that's kind of diminishing, the people who aren't necessarily big figures in, pop culture or whatever the case may be? Do you think it makes it harder for those people who are just new to this to, kind of climb up that ladder in the podcasting world? Like, how do you feel about something like that?
I don't. I believe that the struggle up is going to be hard no matter what. If anything, those people just gave you an open because they introduced more people to podcasts, and then you come in and say, that's a podcast that's on a network. And so they're probably saying, what they have to say to keep that thing. But I'm a podcast, and all I do is because I podcast and I like this. So when I'm talking about the local news in Denver, I'm bringing it because I feel this way about my neighborhood in Denver. That's not necessarily what he does. So why don't you support me because I'm local? So it's just about finding your curve and saying to me, this is why I'm better, and this is why you should choose me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I know a lot of times, especially lately, I've been noticing that a lot of public figureheads have been getting into the podcasting world, and it kind of makes me feel like, what happened to the little guy, So,
but I feel like, see, that's the thing. I feel like the little guy has to go more local and see what's out there. Like, so, we're talking about podcasts that they're getting in there because of money, which is, just reality. But it's like, if you're somebody, I'm in Denver, say if I'm getting like 200 or 300 listens from local people in Denver, I can go to a couple of Denver businesses and say, you know what, you're doing real estate here. I know people listening might like that. What about if you sponsor my podcast for this, this, and this? Like, what about if I don't go to mid-roll for my things? I make my money locally and no telling what I could be doing, or be sponsored into doing shows and stuff like that. But to me, it's just like finding your curve on it, because not everybody's going to have the same path to success, and success won't look the same for everybody. Like, everybody doesn't need to be number one on iTunes to be a successful person in podcasting. So
right, cool, right on. I was like, yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
One last question, because I know you're a busy woman. We got to go. But what, besides the read, what are your top 5? I'll do 5. Top 5 favorite podcasts and why?
Okay, let's see here. So I'll do my real top 5, and it's my real top 5 is always going to be The Read, number 1.
Of course.
After that, you're going to get My Leak with My Talk to You.
Oh, okay.
After that, you're going to get Bodega Boys, Hello, Jesus and Nero.
Yes.
After that, you're going to get Another Round with Heaven and Tracy. And then number 5 right now, let's see. I guess this is kind of like my entertain space right now. I'd say Call Your Girlfriend, because they give me things nobody else does. So, what I mean, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And
I would say, I didn't give you my reasons, but it's because they're all funny and they're all true to what they feel like. My Leak, I feel like she inspires me the most because I doubt myself, and she's always telling me to get out of my head. She's always telling me to just do it anyway, and that's how a lot of stuff gets done. So it's just everybody brings something different to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
cool.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Barry, you have no idea. We are very, very much appreciative. You are an awesome person.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
And thank you so much for putting in the work. You've done a lot of work for the community and podcast community and the Black community and the Black podcast community. So very much appreciated. And for those who don't know, if you are a podcast of color, you can go ahead and go onto podcasts with an S, incolor.com, and go ahead and sign up and register your podcast onto her website. And also you can catch podcasts in color. Remember, I said podcast with an S on Twitter. Also Instagram and Facebook by the same name. Barry, you are an amazing human being. Thank you so much for all your work.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the word.
And we hope we can have you on the show again. Obviously, professional schedules permitting. Yes.
Let me know. Invite me back. I'm always down to talk podcast.
Yes,
so.
ma'am. I'm gonna hold you to that. And when you're in LA, let us know. Send us a DM or send Marisol DM or whatever. Let us know. We'll treat you, girl. We're going to buy you a couple of drinks, girl.
Okay, we'll let you know.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Blazers. Thank you guys so much for listening. You know, you guys can always go into entertheblaze.com for all of your information. # entertheblaze. You like that plug-in, Barry? You like that? So, we are learning, child. It's been a fantastic episode. Go ahead and check out all of our episodes on entertheblaze.com by going and also listening to After the Blaze podcast, which is our companion podcast as well, with Hope Giselle and 50 Shades of Gay. We are Kwame and Miss Free. We are out.
Bye.